suitcase was already packed. 62 years of living had taught me that a packed suitcase is a promise, to yourself, to the road, to whoever's waiting on the other side. Mine sat by the front door at 9:47 p.m., fat and ready, smelling faintly of the cedar sachets my late wife Alina used to tuck into every bag we ever owned. I was on my second cup of decaf, watching a weather report about the Florida coast, sunny skies, 78 degrees, when my phone buzzed. It was my son, Daniel, and the first word he typed was Dad. Just that, one word, followed by a pause that I could feel through the screen. Nothing good has ever followed a man texting his father, Dad, at 9:47 at night. Let me back up, because you need to understand what this vacation meant to me before you can understand what came next. My name is Gerald Kowalski. I'm 62, recently retired from 31 years as a high school history teacher, widower of 3 years, and grandfather to 2 of the most spectacular children God ever permitted onto this earth, Rosie, who is 7 and narrates her entire life like she's hosting a nature documentary, and Marcus, who is 4 and still calls me Gampa Jerry in a way that makes my chest feel like it's full of warm bread. The trip had been planned for 4 months, a week at a beach house in the Florida Keys. Daniel, his wife Bryn, the kids, and me. We'd done variations of this trip when the children were smaller, when Alina was still alive and could help wrangle the chaos. After she passed, I quietly assumed those kinds of trips were behind me, not because anyone said so, but because grief has a way of making you feel like you've been quietly excused from the table. Then Daniel called in October and said, Dad, we're doing the Keys in February, you're coming. I didn't argue. I bought sunscreen for the first time in 3 years. Bryn and I have always had what I would charitably describe as a careful relationship. She's not a bad person. I want to be clear about that because it's important. She's a good mother, she loves my son, she works hard, but we have never quite found our rhythm. I suspect I remind her too much of the family she grew up trying to escape, traditional, loud, a little too comfortable taking up space. And she, I'll admit, has occasionally made me feel like a houseplant that wandered in from someone else's home, tolerated, occasionally watered. Still 4 months of planning. 4 months of Rosie calling me every week to tell me what she wanted to show me at the beach. 4 months of Marcus asking every single time I picked up the phone, Gampa, are we going yet? The suitcase by the door wasn't just luggage. It was a declaration, I still belong somewhere. Then Daniel's text arrived. Dad, something came up. Bryn's not comfortable with the sleeping situation. She thinks the house is too small for all 5 of us. She needs the week to be more of a couple and kids thing. I'm really sorry, I tried. I read it 3 times. Then I set my phone face down on the coffee table and looked at Alina's photo on the mantle. Well, I said out loud to her, that's something. I want to be honest about what happened inside me in the next 10 minutes, because this story isn't worth telling if I'm not honest. First came the hurt, swift and total, the kind that lands in your sternum and just stays there, like a stone dropped into still water. Then came the anger, which I will not pretend was small or dignified. I paced my living room. I said things under my breath that a history teacher should know better than to say. I thought about calling Daniel back and telling him exactly what I thought of his wife's sudden sensitivity to square footage. I did not do those things. I've buried a wife. I've lost students to wars and overdoses and accidents. I have, on 2 separate occasions, had to identify relatives at hospitals. I know the difference between a tragedy and a bad night. This was a bad night. A painful, unfair, genuinely hurtful bad night, but a bad night. I picked up my phone. I called my old friend Raymond instead. Raymond and I taught together for 20 years. He retired 2 years before me and immediately did something I considered mildly insane at the time. He bought a used RV, named it the Deliberate Life, and started driving places. He's been to 41 states. He sends me postcards with his commentary scrawled on the back in his terrible handwriting. He is, objectively, living better than the rest of us. He answered on the second ring. Gerald, it's almost 10, you dying? No, I said, but I've been uninvited from a family vacation, and I have a packed suitcase and a week off. A pause, then Raymond said the most important 5 words of my year. So go somewhere else, man. And that is what I did. I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where I once helped Daniel with trigonometry homework, where Alina and I drank coffee every Sunday morning for 30 years, and I opened my laptop. I had a week. I had a suitcase already packed. I had a car, a valid license, and a credit card with room on it. What I did not have was a plan, and for a man who spent 3 decades teaching students the importance of preparation, the absence of a plan felt less like a problem and more like a door left open. I drove to the Florida Keys anyway. Not because I wanted to be near Daniel and Bryn. I was not interested in a dramatic, unwanted cameo in their family week. I drove to the Keys because it was where I had been pointed for 4 months, and because Rosie had described the sunset over the water to me in such specific, breathless detail, Gamper, it's orange and pink and purple all at the same time, that I wanted to see it for myself. I found a small motel 20 minutes from the beach house my family was renting, the kind of place that hasn't changed its sign since 1987. The woman behind the desk was named Pat. She had a cat named Bismarck who supervised the lobby from a wicker basket, and she gave me a room that faced the water for $68 a night. I stood on my little balcony that first night and watched the sky do exactly what Rosie had promised. Orange, pink, purple, all at the same time. I didn't cry, but I considered it seriously. Here is what I did with my week, and I'm telling you this not to brag, but because I need you to understand something I'm still processing myself. I went fishing. I had not been fishing in 11 years, since a trip with Daniel when he was 24, and we'd both been too proud to admit we didn't know what we were doing. I rented a spot on a small charter boat and sat next to a retired firefighter from Ohio named Harold, and we caught very little and talked an enormous amount. He was also recently widowed. We didn't make a big deal of it. We just talked about fishing and football and the particular loneliness of eating dinner alone in a house that used to be full. I visited the Hemingway house in Key West. I've taught Hemingway more times than I can count, and I'd never once made the pilgrimage. I walked through the rooms where he wrote and drank and raged and loved and walked through walls. I stood in his studio and thought about the ways men fail the people closest to them and still somehow leave something beautiful behind. The 6-toed cats wandered around my ankles like small, opinionated editors. I found a little Cuban restaurant where the owner, a woman named Celia, started recognizing me by my 3rd visit and brought me a cortadito without my asking. I ate slowly. I read a book. I watched people come and go. I did not rush a single meal. On Wednesday, I texted Daniel, "I'm in the Keys, not anywhere near your place. Just wanted you to know I'm okay." He called within 30 seconds, his voice tightly wound with guilt. "Dad, how are you?" "I'm good," I said. "Genuinely, I went fishing yesterday. Tell Rosie the sunsets are exactly as she described." The silence on his end was long and complicated. I let it be. "Dad, I'm so sorry. What Bryn did." "Daniel," I kept my voice even because I meant what I was about to say. "We'll talk when you get home, not now. You're on vacation with your kids. Go be with your kids." Another pause, then quietly, "You're a better man than I'd be." "I'm a tired man," I corrected him. "There's a difference. They look similar from the outside." On Thursday, the knock I wasn't expecting came. I was sitting on my motel balcony with my book and my coffee when I heard small feet on the outdoor walkway, the distinctive gallop of someone who has not yet learned that running on metal stairs is loud. Then a small face appeared around the corner of my balcony. "Rosie." She was wearing her bathing suit and a look of concentrated stealth that suggested she believed herself to be invisible. Behind her, around the corner, I heard Daniel's voice, not surprised, not apologetic. "Just go ahead, Bug. I've got Marcus." She climbed over the railing, which gave me a small heart attack, and stood in front of me with her hands on her hips. "Gamper Jerry," she said, "did you come to the Keys without us?" "I did," I said. She considered this. "That's kind of cool, actually." "I thought so." She climbed into the chair beside me and looked at the water with the focused appreciation of someone twice her age. We sat there for a moment in the kind of comfortable silence that only exists between people who genuinely like each other. Gamper, she said finally. Yeah, bug. The sunset here is orange and pink and purple, all at the same time. I know, I said. I've been watching. She nodded, satisfied, as if this confirmed something important. Then she stole my coffee. She just picked it up and took a sip, completely without permission, and made a face at the taste, but didn't put it down, and we sat there together, watching the afternoon light move across the water. Daniel appeared eventually, Marcus asleep on his shoulder. He looked at me for a long moment over Rosie's head. His eyes said things that would take us months to properly say out loud. I nodded, he nodded back. We didn't solve anything that afternoon. The dinner that followed was complicated, and the conversation that needed to happen with Bryn was still weeks away, and there are dynamics in my family that a week in Florida was never going to untangle. But the suitcase had been packed, and I'd taken it somewhere anyway. That, I think, is the only lesson here, not triumph, not revenge, not some tidy redemption arc. Just this, when someone removes you from the story, you don't stop moving, you find another road. You watch the sunset anyway, you let a 7-year-old steal your coffee and narrate the ocean like she's on the BBC. Elena would have done the same thing. She'd have driven down there herself and had Celia's cortadito before I even found the motel. I'm learning to be a little more like her.